Welcome to Underlords Universe, and we like to discuss all kinds of stuff that we're interested in, things like rock and roll and heavy metal, and occasionally, like sci-fi and horror films and stuff like that. Today, we are discussing the first three Kiss records, and before we go any further, I'd like to first of all say thanks for stumbling across us. Second of all, if you're new to the channel and you like what you see, please like and subscribe. And third, is that three? I guess it's three. We make our own creative stuff in what we call the Underlords universe, and as a band called the Underlords of the Overworld. We recently did a song with Blaze Bayley on vocals, former Iron Maiden vocalist. We're going to put a link down below in case anybody wants to check that out. We're really proud of it. Hopefully you like it. If you do, great. If you don't, God bless you. But at any rate, we've been doing a series. We've done Van Halen, we did Black Sabbath, we're doing Blue Oyster Cult, etc. We're doing looking at the bands that we like, and we're breaking their catalogs up into chunks. We try to make them manageable chunks. I think with Sabbath we did like 6-7 albums at a time. I think with BOC we're doing like 5 at a time. We're also breaking them up though, hopefully with some reasonable demarcation lines, like in eras or reasonable dividing points in their career, as well as in roughly equal amounts of albums. And then what we're doing is we are applying a rating system to these chunks. And so we're going to do the first three Kiss albums. We're going to talk about how we rated them and how they ended up ultimately being ranked based on our rating system. Does that seem like a fair introduction, Brent?
I think that's a perfect introduction.
Okay. And with this one, it's just you and me doing this one. We've got our colleague Josh on some of the others. We've got some other friends that have been involved in some of the others as well. So if you like our style, check out those other videos. But we're going to be doing smaller chunks. We're going to do the Kiss albums in smaller chunks. First, I'm just going to quickly describe what those chunks are. We're doing the original 70s Kiss in two hunks. The first three Kiss albums, and then the second three Kiss albums will be part 2. Then we're going to do what we call like transitional Kiss, which is Dynasty, Unmasked Music from the Elder, Creatures of the Night. That'll be part 3. Part 4 is kind of their 80s kind of glam metal period. Lick It Up, Animalize an Asylum. And then a transitional section, part 2, which is kind of their pop, Crazy Nights, back to kind of hard rock with Hot in the Shade, then really more into the heavier side again with Revenge, and then kind of into the grunge with Carnival of Souls. So that's transition part 2, which is actually episode 5 that we'll be doing. And then what I kind of think of it as prodigal Kiss, like the prodigal son returning home. So they kind of return to they return to the makeup, they return to more of a traditional style, starting with Psycho Circus and then Sonic Boom and then Monster. We're also going to do a side episode on the 4 solo albums released in 1978. And then at the very end, we're going to do a culminating episode that has like the aggregate rankings of all of the Kiss records. So with that in mind, I got my props ready to go. I'm using the originals.
Oh, that's cool.
I just thought, just for something different, instead of holding up the CD or the regular vinyls, I thought I'd pull these out. But since we're doing just the first 3, it'd be very, very easy. Did you have what was your preconception about how these albums would rank? Did you think, Dress to Kill would come in first, Hotter Than Hell, the debut? What were your thoughts on that? And then I thought we'd go into the albums themselves.
I kind of thought the debut would finish first among these 3. And I kind of thought
and by the way, don't disclose whether it did or didn't. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I kind of thought Dress to Kill would finish 3rd out of these 3.
Okay.
I guess we'll. So, but yeah.
So you thought that they would go in the order of release. You thought that your favorite would be the debut, followed by Hotter Than Hell, followed by Dress to Kill. Is that what you were?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's
Okay.
a fair statement.
Um, I actually had the other idea in mind. My gut was telling me that Dress to Kill would come in first, and then the other two was really kind of a toss up for me. I thought, oh, well, between the debut and Hotter Than Hell, it's going to be a toss up. Um, the funny thing is that uh, I was sort of right in a certain way, and I was sort of wrong in a certain way. So I think this is a good moment to just explain our rating system then.
Sure.
And the way we do this is we say, well, we're going to award a song up to 5 points. Two and a half is just kind of like, man, it's just there. I mean, nothing wrong with it, but it's just a song. Once we start getting into 3, then it's a matter of degrees about how much we like the song. Yeah, it's a good song, or that's a great song, or man, I can't live without that song. That's kind of like your 3, 4, and 5. That's how I think of it. And then when you get below 2.5, you get to 2 or 1.5 or 1. It's like there's stuff about this song that just grates against me, or I just for whatever reason can't get on board with it. So we try to have kind of a little bit of internal consistency with that. And then what we do is we add up the total number of points, divide by the total number of songs, and that gives an average rating. I personally then take the average. Let's say it's 3.7. Well, then I would round that and say 3.5 as a star, like 3.5 stars. Take the total number of points and you divide by the total points possible. If it's a 10 song album, it'd be 50 points possible. If it's, an 11 song album, it's 55 points possible. So you divide by that and you get an average percentile. It's the percentage. And I usually use those percentages to nitpick, those rankings. Because a lot of these albums to me are 3-star albums or 4-star albums or whatever. It's those percentages where I kind of see the ranking coming out. And Brent, I know you kind of do it in a pretty similar fashion, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. Well, tell you what, let's hit this. Let's get into the first Kiss record.
Okay.
And
which we celebrated the 50th anniversary of its release last month.
We just did. I don't know if you heard this, but I have heard, apparently Paul had said at one point that the master tapes were lost, and so that the possibility of doing anything with the master tapes in terms of like remixing or anything like that is just not ever going to happen. And if that's the case, that's unfortunate, but it's not as if there's a ton of stuff out there they could do a 50th anniversary, even without the master tape, it would seem to me. But and if they don't, that's lost opportunity, because I know the album gets a lot of flack and for a lot of reasons. It sounds a little dull. It's not real energetic or whatever the criticisms tend to be of it, but it's still one of those classic debut albums from a band that has stood the test of time. I mean, they still play so many songs from this. I should say up until the last tour, they played so many songs from this record. You can kind of go into this and say, well, I mean, my God, how do you rate this, low in any way? But there are some things about it that do kind of pull it down. So I got my highs, I got my lows, I got my overall thoughts on it. I just introduced the record. Why don't you go ahead and start in with what your thoughts are on highs, lows, etc.
Okay. You mentioned the dull, I would say conservative approach production to this record. You compare this record to the demo they did with Eddie Kramer in 1973, which I believe had Strutter, Firehouse, Watching You, Cold Gin, and Deuce.
Yeah.
That demo, the versions of those songs, in my view, are better than the versions of the songs on this record, in part because it's a much more energetic recording. It just sounds better, in my opinion. Although I will say that I think the version of Strutter, the demo version, is the best version of that song that I've ever heard. The demo version of Strutter is superior, in my view, to the version of Strutter that's on the debut album. But that all said, as you pointed out, this album has just classic song after classic song. I mean, Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce, 100,000 Years, Black Diamond. These were all concert staples literally for decades. And they
You know,
built their foundation upon these songs.
having having
So
having said that, though, you know, you and I both oftentimes find that the deep cuts are maybe the more endearing ones to us for some reasons. Not always, you know. I mean, there some of their classic stuff I love, but you know, sometimes it's the deep cuts that provoke the more interesting conversations. You know, everybody knows, you know, like Strutter and whatever and Black Diamond but you know, you mentioned the demo. Of course, interesting watching you doesn't appear until Hotter Than Hell.
right.
I will say that I think I'm going to start on let's not worry about going in order necessarily. Um, but the demo version of Firehouse, the arrangement of, I think the energy is there on the demo version, and that's superior. But I think the arrangement of the song on the debut is far better. I think the arrangement of the demo,
I,
and you can hear it also in some of the earlier live bootlegs that are out there. It's a little goofy in terms of, you know, they kind of use their vocal to emulate almost like a siren sound at one point, and it just lacks cohesiveness. And I think the version on the album is much more cohesive as an arrangement. Having
yeah,
said that, though, I find the version of Firehouse on the debut is plodding and almost, I hate to say it, boring.
it, the
Now,
song is very sluggish. Cold Gin is sluggish on this
the,
record.
those,
Firehouse is sluggish.
yes, those two especially, Firehouse and Cold Gin, are very weak compared to the versions that are on Alive.
Right.
And you know, you could say, well, you're here to rate or discuss and grade and rate a song. Is it a good song or is it not? And it's like, well, but some of that also does come down to the production and you know, the performance that's caught on record, and you know, those kind of intangible elements. And I honestly, as far as the studio versions of Firehouse and Cold Gin, I only give them three three points each song. Um, they're pretty skippable in that regard. Now, I like the songs, so I usually wouldn't skip them, but they're the low points on the record for me. Um, in fact, I think virtually every song on this record, and I'm not any different than most people here that like Kiss. Most people would say the live versions are better, period. And that's generally true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, and we'll probably get into the live albums as well at some point. But to your point, that's how I reviewed this record when I, you know, listened to it. I don't know how many times I've listened to it over 40 some years, but this time listening to it, knowing that I was going to rate it, I'm rating it based upon what I'm hearing, not what I want to hear, what I don't hear,
Yeah.
what's on live. I'm listening to this record and rating this record. So for me, the high points of the record, and you mentioned Deep Cuts, Let Me Know is a 5-star song for me. I love that song. The other 5-star songs on the record for me were Deuce and Strutter. I give those 5 stars. I gave Firehouse and Cold Gin 4s. I gave Black Diamond 4. Most of these songs, if we get to Alive, probably all those will be 5-star songs, I would wager a guess, with the exception of Let Me Know, which is not on Alive. But for me, the one song, and this was not on the original release, Kissin' Time wasn't put on until later
Yeah.
pressings of the record.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I gave Kissing Time a 2. I've never liked Kissing Time. And so if you were to take Kissing Time off my rating, the record rates significantly higher without it, because it drags it down so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing else on the record for me is less than a 3. So it would have been a better record in terms of how it grades without it. Am I glad they did it? Sure. Generally speaking, I don't prefer that bands or artists not record songs. Very rarely would I say, yeah, I'm glad I wish they hadn't done that.
Yeah.
I'm usually glad they do anything that they do. But Kissin' Time is probably, well, it is my least favorite song on the record, and it's probably one of my least favorite Kiss songs, period. But it doesn't really blemish what I think everyone would, not everyone, but you and I would agree is one of the best debut albums that's ever been recorded.
Well, I don't
And
know. I don't know about that. I mean,
Well,
that in and of itself would be a good a good exercise, is like, you know, an episode on the best debut albums of all time. Because when I, you know, you said you listen to this album again, and you're listening to it for the umpteenth time. You've heard it so many times over 40, you know, whatever years, 50 years, excuse me. Well, 40 since we've been listening to it. We weren't listening to
sure.
it when we were two. But uh I'm going to be contrarian here. And I know that this would be like, I get slagged by anybody, you know, any Kiss fan who's watching this. I'd rather listen to Kissin' Time on this than Firehouse or Cold Gin. I just
There's there's
and
nothing wrong with it. There's
and
nothing wrong.
yeah, but it's not because the song is inherently better. Um, Again, you know, trying to grade this without thinking of the live versions is a little difficult. But it's like, you know what? The live version of the song is a different version of the song. And like, for example, if I said Firehouse is a 5 on a live, therefore it has to be a 5 on the debut, I don't think that that's accurate,
No,
because
I don't agree.
it's different performance, different recording. It sounds different. And that the whole point is it is not the same. So um now, because we're not just simply trying to rate the composition, you know, there's other intangible qualities here to this. I actually think Kissin' Time is underrated in a certain respect. First of all, I like the fact that Gene Paul and Peter trade off lead vocals in it. I love that, and it's kind of rare. You know, I mean, it's not rare to hear all of them on every album, of course, because they all sing lead on every album that they were on. But you know, you rarely get those moments where they all sing lead on one song. I think that's pretty cool. Also, Kissin' Time, the second verse is I think that's the first song I ever heard where I heard a drummer use the ride cymbal like he does, like that kind of playing. When I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, Peter Criss is amazing, because listen to what he's doing with that ride cymbal. And you know, because I heard it as a kid, it still kind of gives me that feeling. So I give Kissin' Time 3.5 stars. But you know, I actually rated it higher than Firehouse and Cold Gin. I agree with you about Let Me Know, though. I love Let Me Know. I love the way the song, you know, ends with that
Mm.
you know, that nice vocal harmony part that goes into that cool riff that they end up putting later on the live version on She. I do want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about Nothing to Lose,
Mhm.
because the first pressings that we owned, of course, were not first pressings of the album, and
Correct.
subsequent pressings of the album had the live version, and versions of the debut that came out after Alive
Hmm.
had the live version of Nothing to Lose on it. And I never understood why. Never understood what the point was of that.
Right.
And it was a long time until we heard, I think it may have been when I got a copy of the originals,
Could
uh,
be.
that that I heard the studio version of it. And I I love that in there with that kind of Jerry Lewis kind of style, like piano.
I think it's great.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Very cool. It's very cool.
Um, I will say, I think if I had to pick like the high point, like what is the high point of the record, to me it's Black Diamond. It almost has a proggy structure to it in a way, and you know that slow at the very end they just hit those chords over and over, and it just slows down and slows down and slows down.
Mm.
That to me, I wrote this in my notes. The slow cascade at the end is like audibly going into another world. And that's how I felt when I put that album on and listened to it start to finish with headphones on. At that very end, it was just like going into another world, like it's going into some sort of deep vortex or something.
Well, for me,
Wow,
I
that is so cool.
at the very end, it almost like you know, because there's the lyric "out on the streets," and we know that the song's about what the song is about.
Yeah.
when you get to the end of the song, that slow part, like you're just describing, you can almost hear like it takes me to like I'm on the street, it's night, it's kind of dangerous, it's dark.
Mm.
You kind of get that vibe and that feel. There's like at the very end, even some audible things that I don't think are guitar chords that you hear. And it almost sounds like maybe you're out on the street. It's a pretty
Mhm.
cool way to end the record. I totally agree.
Yeah, yeah.
It's okay. We talked about the production. So one question I would have for you about production, because I know we're going to talk about production when we get to Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah.
If the debut album had more of a slick production and a little bit more energy behind the songs, do you think you would have do you think you would have graded it differently, or do you think it would?
Yeah, probably. I do. But here's the other thing, though. I mean, that doesn't mean number one, I don't think I would want to change it, though. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wouldn't bother me if you did have access to the master takes and or master tapes and remixed it. I'd love to hear a remix of it. Cool. I don't mind that sort of thing. Sometimes I really like it. But I wouldn't want it to completely replace the original.
Oh no.
It is what it is, and I like it for what it is. The other
Right.
thing I wanted to say is I've tried to research. I've searched around to try to find information on where Kissin' Time was recorded, because to my ear, Kissin' Time sounds more like the production on Hotter Than Hell than the rest of the debut album,
It does.
even though they weren't in the Hotter Than Hell sessions at that moment. And it's kind of like, well, they kind of slag the production on Hotter Than Hell, but it's kind of like, well, you had a taste of that doing Kissin' Time, and you could have corrected course there perhaps somehow. Of course, there could be all sorts of factors involved in that, but I'm not really aware of. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is, and it's a really, like you said, it is one of the greatest debut albums of all time. Where it stacks up against other great debut albums remains to be seen for us. But yeah. Let's see. Is there any? It's kind of funny. I always thought Love Theme from Kiss when we were kids. I thought Love Theme from Kiss was like, wow, man, they're such great players. This is a great instrumental, and I think it has a certain charm to it. I like it, but it's not YYZ.
No, and I've never
Um,
really understood why it's called Love Theme from Kiss, but I guess that's neither here nor there. I think it was wasn't it part of Acrobat?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
not the best title either, but I don't.
No, no. Um, but it is what it is. I also think it's kind of weird. They open the show, all their shows back then with Deuce, but then Deuce, on the original pressing it opened side two, and then on the repressings after Kissin' Time was added, it's the second song on side two, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of awkward from a sequencing position too. But it's funny what you get used to though too, because you listen to an album so many times, and then whatever sequence is there just becomes ingrained in your head, and then you have to kind of purposely step back from it and go, is that really the best sequencing for this record?
The answer to that is probably no, but it is what it is, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. And that's not to say Strutter isn't a good opener for the record, because it is. I mean that.
yeah,
I mean it's yeah. So
yeah, it's a great opener.
cool. All right, so ready to move on to Hotter Than Hell then?
Yep.
Okay. Now I just want to start off by saying that quite a few of the songs. Sorry, I'm moving my computer there. Quite a few of the songs on the debut, I would say, oh, it's better live. I would also say a couple of the songs on Hotter Than Hell are better unplugged.
That's interesting.
Yeah, from the MTV Unplugged, and obviously the production, it's such a harsh, brittle sound. Here's something that I don't know if you remember this, but my original CD copy of this, and I think it was across, either a lot of the pressings of the very first CD version of this that came out, but it had this like almost unforgivable, like scratchy sound that would pop in and out on the original CD, and it almost made it unlistenable. And I know that it was the CD itself, or the master of the CD, because if I put on the vinyl, yeah, it had that kind of brittle production sound, but none of those screechy, scratchy sounds. Did your original CD version of that have anything like that?
I don't think so, but I do think I recall what you're talking about. I can't say for sure, but that does sound vaguely familiar. Yes.
Yeah. I also want to say that album cover, I to this day, it's one of my favorite album covers. I love that album. It's just so uniquely 70s, you know? I
Does
just
it bother the black and white picture? Do you
no,
wish
not
no?
at all. I think it's cool. The fact that the picture's black and white and everything else around it is in color with that kind of red and gray kind of, yeah, I love that. Love that album cover. I mean, how cool do they look there? You know, I'm not really one that really worries too much about what they look like half the time,
It
but
looked
that
very
is a
cool.
great picture. Yeah. So at any rate, I think I think Got to Choose. I like Got to Choose. I think it's a really good song. My favorite version of Got to Choose those on MTV Unplugged.
I
So
love that version.
yeah, I think in terms of Parasite, obviously, Peter sings it because Ace wasn't singing his own songs at the time, right?
Hmm.
Um, I
Well, actually, Gene sings Parasite.
not on the studio version.
Yeah, he does.
That's Peter.
That's Gene.
Oh, okay. Hang on. I'm talking about the chorus. It's Peter in the
Oh,
choruses.
yeah, you can hear Peter in the chorus very distinctly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sorry. We need to we need a distinction there. It's not okay. So time out. We've been listening to this album for 40 years. We know what we're talking about. We're just not defining accurately what we're talking about.
Yeah,
And
you
that's
can
my that's my
very
fault.
yeah you can hear Peter very prominently in the chorus for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if you can see my note here, but it says Peter's vocal in the chorus.
Yeah.
Okay. So um yeah, and his vibrato in the chorus, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you're right. Gene sings the verses, and then Peter comes in on those. And because of that, I like the studio version. I think the studio version is really great. It's unique like that. I don't think that's the best version of it though. I again, I prefer the live. I prefer, and it has an extra chorus that's tagged on,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's a better arrangement on the live versions. On the Revenge tour, they started doing the harmony
With Eric Singer.
in the choruses,
Yep.
and but that's why I love live versions. I might like a live version more, but it doesn't mean that I dislike the original. I give the original 4.5 simply because I would give the version on a live 5. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's so there's that. Um, Now, when we were kids, I thought Going Blind was terrible. I hated that song when we were kids. I do
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's better unplugged. I don't mind it anymore, really, this version. But
I think it's the low point on the record, but I get what you're saying.
yeah,
I
um,
gave it I gave it the worst grade of any song on the record.
there's some people that love it.
Yeah,
Um,
I
you
know.
know, yeah, I don't love it either. I think it works better acoustically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously it gets slagged because the lyric is kind of creepy,
Mm-hmm.
but that lyric, I'm 93, you're 16, and I think I'm going blind. There's if correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no other lyric in the verses or the chorus anywhere in the song that is suggestive of anything that's, well, let me put it this way. When I was a kid, I always just interpreted the song as um like a really old man sitting on a porch and just talking to this little kid and just saying, you know, we're just to different lives, different generation. You know, I'm kind of at the end of a life journey experience, and you are beginning one. And that's how I always interpreted the song. And so I don't know, other people are, God, that's so creepy. And it's like, well, I don't know, what else are you reading into it? You
Yeah,
know?
I don't a whole lot to read
Um,
in. I,
but you know, the funny thing is that the original version of it, there's a lyric, and this is gets to the bizarre nature of the lyric. It said the little lady from the land beneath the sea,
right.
which I think Gene brought that lyric back on the unplugged version, and I believe it was kind of supposed to be almost like a sea captain talking to a mermaid.
That works.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything, overtly bad about the lyric. It's a little bit perhaps
It's just,
unsettling. You just hear that one line and nothing else. It's kind of like, oh well, but
yeah.
again, it's just one line in the song. I don't think there's anything really suggestive in the rest of the track, if that was your question. I don't think
No,
so.
no. And you know, now that's obviously, you know, there's some things later in their career that you can really, you know, say, you know, come on, guys. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, that one,
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of a weird lyric. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
you but it's not, you know, it's not one of my favorite tracks, but I do think works much better acoustically. The title track, though, I mean, hotter than hell. Just, I mean, you know, Paul said that this is basically a rewrite of All Right Now by Free, which I
Mm-hmm.
can totally hear that in kind of that choppy nature of the riff, the kind of that, but this one of my favorite Kiss songs. I love how, you know, you go through the verses and the chorus and stuff, and then you get to that now and the riff changes, and they just get that whole outro riff that just slams. I love the guitar solos in the end as well. It's
The
like
gong.
the gong that goes into that. It's just, oh my, that is so great. So great. And and of course there's the Rip and Destroy version that's on Kiss Meets the
Yeah.
Phantom too, which, you know,
Right.
so yeah, I you know, I don't want to keep kind of monopolizing the conversation here. It's just kind of interesting because some of these songs seem like Let Me Go Rock and Roll. It's like, you know, the live version extends out and has all the jams on it and stuff. This one's very short, concise. I actually prefer the studio version of Watching You to the version that's on Alive.
I tend to agree with that for
Really?
whatever. Yeah, and the version that's on Alive 3.
Yeah, we'll have to do something on the live albums because that's, yeah, I'd forgotten that was on a live 3, but you're right. That's, yeah, yeah. I you know, you get to this stretch of like, you're like, I first of all, I think All the Way is an underrated gem.
Oh, I like All the Way quite a bit. Yeah.
I mean, that's just got a cool riff to it, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
octave with the little walk in between the octaves and stuff. But you know, Mainline, Coming Home, I think those are good songs. I think Coming Home is better unplugged. I just kind of look at that and go, oh yeah, those are good songs. But it's Strange Ways. I mean, Strange Ways, to me, if I had to pick, simply because I think Parasite's better live. If I had to pick the best, like one song from this record, it'd be a fight between the title track and Strange Ways, but Strange Ways would probably win. That riff is so ominous. And it's like they just didn't do songs quite like that, you know? It's such an anomaly, but it works so well. I think Peter's vocal is really good on it, and that may be Ace Frehley's greatest guitar solo of all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so yeah, it's such a strange guitar solo, but yeah,
Right, and it's a great way to end the record too.
yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah,
so.
you could
Um,
say they recorded a lot of heavy songs, later in their career, but you can argue that Strange Ways is just as heavy, one of the heaviest songs they ever recorded in their entire career, especially when you consider it was done in 1974.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and it's unfortunate that they never played it live, but I have to go back and double check. I think when we saw Ace, we've seen Ace a couple times. I think maybe in Council Bluffs, I think they played it. I can't remember exactly if they played it up in Clear Lake, but I think they played it in Council Bluffs. But
I think he's played it. I think there was one time where he played it and Peter joined him and sang it. This would have been a one-off thing. But yeah, I'm trying to remember if he played it when we saw him, rather, I should say. And I just don't recall off the top of my head.
yeah,
But if I had to pick a favorite song off the record, it would probably be either that or Parasite or Got to Choose. Those would be my three favorite.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can see that. I think with songs like Got to Choose and Parasite, it's probably just because I prefer the live versions. I tend to go more the deep cuts like Strange Ways. Although, you know what, Hotter Than Hell, the title track's not, it's not a deep cut. So,
No.
Or All the Way. Yeah. But
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, at this point, going through these two records, when I was listening to them and rating, I was thinking, boy, these two albums, when I add up the totals, they're probably going to be, pretty close. They're probably going to be pretty comparable to each other, but we'll see how that shakes out in terms of the overall.
I want to make
yeah, go ahead.
About Mainline. When I was a kid, I did a radio show, right? Where you would take like one ghetto blaster and another ghetto blaster and put them facing each other. You'd put a tape with music in one and you'd record it on the other. So that way you could talk over the music. Then it would record like you're on the radio, where you can talk and hear the music in the background. And I used the ending riff as Mainline as like the title music for my radio show that I did.
How old were you when you were doing that?
I'm gonna guess I was probably, maybe 12, maybe 11 or 12 years.
So you're talking about that when that riff comes in is down, 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 bow, bow.
Yeah.
Down, 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 bow, bow, bow. But and then be like, this is Brent on radio, whatever.
Yeah, that was my radio show. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that works. If you became a DJ, that would actually have worked really well. So
right. And I've there's no song on this record, with the exception possibly of I don't dislike Going Blind. I just like the other songs better. I gave Going Blind a 3, which is the lowest grade I gave on any song on this record.
I gave Going Blind a 3 as well.
But this record really is hot from start to finish. It's just, it's got some of their the production issues aside, and honestly, the production doesn't really bother me because we've listened to it this way for all these years. It's kind of like Black Sabbath with Born Again. People slash production. I can't really envision the songs any other way. So I'm just used to it, and it's fine. It's a little dark. It's a little sludgy. That's okay. It's heavy. It's murky. I think it gives these songs some character. It gives the record some character, and I just can't really envision the songs any other way than they are on the record.
And that's the difference between, the artist and the listener, because the artist has an idea in their head of what the song should be and sound like, and the listener only has in their head what the artist gave them.
Right.
And as soon as the artist gives the song out, it's no longer just the artist's, and you can forgive the listeners for saying, oh, no, I love it the way it is. And the artist can be like, yeah, but if you only heard it the way that I could hear it in my head, I should go back and remix it. And if you remix it or whatever, you put out a better version, you re-record it, and it's technically better or whatever. And the listener might go, well, I don't like it as much because it's not what I originally heard. It's not what I originally fell in love with. To me personally, that's one reason why, like, having done studio recording and written stuff with you and other stuff, having that perspective allows me to kind of forgive artists for, you know, redoing or remixing
Mhm.
or whatever. It's like it didn't offend me as long as the original version is still accessible. I like having the multiple versions. I want to hear what, you know, what else their version was like, or
Mhm.
what else they envisioned, or whatever. But you know, some people really hold on to that stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, they're, you know, they remixed it or they redid it, and therefore it just kind of somehow it taints the original. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can see where I understand from a fan perspective why people fall in love with something. Hotter Than Hell has its problems, man, sonically.
Mhm.
It's a weird sounding record, and from an objective standpoint, not good, right? It's just not a good sounding record, but I love it. And I love the way
It,
it sounds, even though it doesn't
well,
sound good.
right. And we could say, well, I'm taking some points away from this album because it sounds bad. But like I said, I can't really envision the song sounding any other way. So I don't do that. I accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
I like it. Even I think it's weird. It's unique. It's different from the debut. You know, I mean, there's really no two Kiss records that sound alike
Mm-mm.
as you go through their whole catalog.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Well, you
And
know, it's
the
look,
song good. They did. I don't think they had a sophomore slump. You know, there's that whole thing. You have your whole life to write your first record. You might have, and I mean, in this case, this record came out 8 months after the debut, so they didn't have a whole lot of time to regroup and go back into the studio.
yeah.
This album just they don't suffer a sophomore slump with this record. They don't.
It's weird because, you know, you could say, well, they did because there's more songs from the debut that stand the test of time in the live set. And from that standpoint, you could say, yeah, it's a bit of a sophomore slump. On the other hand, that's not how I evaluate. Like, I don't look at at an album and go, oh, well, you know what? Strutter is somehow better than All the Way because Strutter got played, you know, tour after tour after tour, and All the Way never got that. That's neither here nor there to me. What I think is, do I like this song as much or better or not as much as that song? It's all it
Right.
comes down to. And
Yep.
yeah, and it's kind of like, you know what? I might recognize that a fillet of fish from McDonald's is not high quality food, but I love them. Sorry, I just do.
I
And
agree. I agree.
I can recognize that Hotter Than Hell is not a quote good sounding record. Its production is flawed in a lot of ways, but I love the way it sounds. So
Yeah. Yeah.
here you go. You want to move along to Dress to Kill?
Let's do that.
All
Let's move
right.
on to
Okay.
Drastic.
So I personally, I think in terms of, you know, let's keeping with the same the theme here of the production. I think to me it's like Dress to Kill has the it's a close it sounds closer to the original record, to the debut, in terms of it's less sludgy, it's less dirgy, it's less dirty sounding, less distorted than Hotter Than Hell, so it sounds much more in line with the debut, but it has more
Mhm.
energy to me. It has more, it just
Mhm.
pops more than the debut album does.
The production is sharper and crisper and a little slicker. A little bit. There's a little bit of a slickness to it, which I like.
Yeah, and that's not, you know, that's mostly up to Dave Whitman as the engineer. I know Neil Bogart, it puts his name on there as producer, but from everything I've read, it's kind of like, well, they're just really just a money saving factor.
Exactly.
He's really just in the studio, just kind of keeping them going, not don't take too many takes because the clock's
Right.
running, the time's running. So, um,
Right.
but yeah, I've always loved Room Service.
Oh, I love.
It's just got a great drive to it. I love in the choruses the guitar line underneath the vocal. I just think is a great little bit. But I
And
think it's
I love how you can hear Gene in the choruses. I love it when you can hear other guys in the band singing in the backing vocals on another guy's song. I
yeah.
love to hear that, and this is a great example of that with Room
Well,
Service.
yeah, in these early days, you get those songs where, you know, you can hear Gene singing backup on a Paul song and vice versa. And, you know, by the time you get to that transitional period in the late 70s, early 80s, it seems like it's like to make a Kiss record, you have Gene songs, Paul songs, and
Mhm. Mhm.
they just
Bass
they
song,
don't, yeah.
yeah.
Um, so I agree with you. Yeah.
I love Room Service, man. Yeah, for me, that's just a stone cold classic. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Love it.
Now, I do think you get into a little bit of a slump right after that. Two timer, it's okay. I mean, it's like
Got a cool riff, man. I hear a little pedestrian, but that riff in the chorus is pretty hot. I
and,
like that.
and I agree. That's exactly the reason why I actually graded it above average.
Mhm.
I think I always thought two timer and Ladies in Waiting were kind of like these two. They like were a pair. They
Yeah,
just fit together as a pair.
I agree.
And if and between those two songs, I think "Ladies in Waiting" is the weaker of the two.
I agree.
Which, by the way, did
I,
you know Gene played rhythm guitar on "Ladies in Waiting"?
I think I did know that.
Yeah. I think "Ladies in Waiting" is probably the weakest song on the record, and
I
to
would
that
agree with that.
to
I
that
would agree.
point, I don't really have much more to say about it. But speaking of people playing instruments that are not their like assigned instrument in the band, Ace plays bass on both Getaway and Rock Bottom,
And
which
Pete sings Getaway.
and Pete, yeah, sings Getaway because of course, Ace isn't ready to take
We'll
on
sing.
lead vocals. But it's kind of funny because I mean, all the way back, I mean, here you are, it's 1975, it's a year or whatever since their debut album, and there's already songs that they're not all playing on necessarily.
Mhm.
I do believe my understanding is on the first two albums they all played on all of those songs, but here they didn't. Um, I gotta say, this version of Rock Bottom is I actually prefer it to the live version myself. I
I
think
do too.
I think it just has more snap to it,
I
and
do too.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not here to critique the live version, so I won't go into that necessarily. But I love the way this studio version sounds. I do think the intro part could maybe be trimmed down. The acoustic intro, it does go on a little bit too long, but they're trying to stretch, right? They're like, oh man, we have to make this a full record. I think the whole thing comes in at like what 28 minutes or something. I mean, it's a
It's like
really short record.
less than a half an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Well, one thing about this Rock Bottom too,
yeah.
I think in the chorus, I think you can hear Ace singing Rock Bottom. I think that's one of the reasons why I like this song a lot in the
Um,
studio. I think you can hear Ace in the chorus.
good point. I think you can. And I do think he does background vocals on those
Hmm.
albums. And I
Yeah.
think you're right. Good call. And I can hear it in my head now. It's like that
Yeah.
does sound like it. Yeah.
Bass. Yeah. And I agree. I like the live version, but I do prefer the studio version for those reasons. I like it a little bit crisper. And I just love the chorus on the studio version because I think you can really hear Ace in there really good, and it just sounds really nice. Just
Yeah.
it's a really nice song.
It's funny because virtually everybody that talks about these things says, well, alive is better than all the live versions on alive are better than the studio versions, and that may be true with a lot of them, but I don't think it's true of all of them.
I don't think it's true
And
at all.
yeah,
I,
so when we do the live albums, we'll dig more into that for sure. My understanding is that Paul does the guitar solo on "Come On and Love Me,"
I believe that's correct.
which I think that's a song that I think is interesting because I mean I all these songs I heard live before I heard studio because Kiss Alive was one of the first records that I ever heard from
Mm.
them, and I Come On and Love Me, like that side two, Come On and Love Me, Parasite, She, like those three songs were just like the pinnacle of the album for me.
Hmm.
And of course, the studio version here, it's got the acoustic guitar, and it just sounds so different, but I love it just as much
Oh, the
because
background, the backing vocal on it, the outro is
yeah,
so cool. Yeah, they cram so the song's like 2.5 minutes, and they cram a smorgasbord of like ear candy in that 2.5 minutes on that song. It's brilliant.
it's
It's,
just
it's
it's simple, but it's so effective.
so
Simple,
catchy.
simple,
Yeah,
catchy, and effective. It's like we're not saying this is, it's not close to the edge, right? But yes, it doesn't, it's not trying to be, right?
Yeah.
And it's just funny because it's a good, like, this is one of those songs where you said, well, which version do you like more, the live or the studio? This one, I don't know. I'd have to flip a coin probably.
Tough. That's a tough
Um,
one.
yeah, you know what? I think Anything for My Baby is an overlooked tune. I don't think it's necessarily as good of a song, but the fact that the drums, keeping those drums, you did the kind of the rolling drums during the choruses, and that's different. Like that's not a typical standard kind of way to approach drums in a chorus on a rock song. So even though it's not my favorite song on the record, I don't really ever skip it because it's
I
different.
know. And again, there's one where you can hear Gene in the choruses on a Paul song. You can hear him very
Yeah.
prominently singing backup vocals, and I love it. Yeah, that's a 4.5-star song for me. I almost gave that a 5. I love that song. It's good, a great song. Good call out.
Yeah, yeah. Now just like well, like Love Her All I Can, she and Love Her All I Can, as well as I mean, Going Blind goes back to the Wicked Lester days, and she
Right,
and Love Her All I Can. It's funny because to this day, I mean, since we were kids, she and Love Her All I Can were the two of the high points for me on the record. And it's like, wow, those are songs that are pre-Kiss songs.
right.
I love those two songs. Those two songs, they're fives, straight up fives for me. I think Love Her All I Can is one of the best Kiss songs ever recorded.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. I think it's just the riff
yeah.
that's in the choruses. Just so catchy.
Well, it's weird too because it's like Gene. Um, it's weird because you have like backing vocals during the verses, and Paul sings the choruses by
Right.
himself.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's you don't that type of an arrangement is really weird, but that's my favorite song on the record, probably that or Room Service. I gave that a 5.
If
Love this song, and that weird quirkiness about, yeah, we're gonna have the backing vocals be the verses, and I'll sing the choruses. That doesn't happen. I don't know if I
no, like it's funny because it's so obvious, but I never even thought of it before. I never I it's completely obvious. It's not that I never quote noticed it. I did. It's just I'd never had it pointed out that that's pretty abnormal, and it actually is. It's like the verses have these harmony vocals on them, and then the chorus is just Paul by himself, and usually it's the other way around. Yeah.
harmony
Yeah.
vocals so good. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Gene sounds great on this record. Sometimes he can kind of go a little bit too much in the monster mode, and
Yeah.
he's really good on this record. I think this is a really good vocal album for these guys, for Peter and Paul and Gene. I think it probably of the first 3 records, the vocals are sounding the best on this record. I
Sure.
think.
But having said that, that's a good segue into Rock and Roll All Night, because I always thought the gang kind of vocal element, they bring in their friends and stuff to do the gang vocals on the chorus to Rock and Roll All Night. I,
Yeah,
that I mean, it's it's like, okay, it's an iconic song and it's an iconic version of the song. Uh, and so I like it because of that, but it's not like, if I'd been there at the time, I think I would have said this just sounds a little goofy. I don't know. It's not one of my favorite uh songs on the record. There's no guitar solo on it,
no,
which I did see Eddie Trunk apparently had a full-blown argument with Ace Frehley, because Ace was like, "Oh yeah, there's a solo on there," and Eddie Trunk's like, "Dude, no, there isn't. Go
no. I've seen.
listen to it."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's why the live version, in my view, is leaps and bounds better than the studio version. The vocals are better, and you get more Ace
yeah,
playing live
yeah,
version. Yeah, I've never been a fan of the chorus. The chorus, actually, if it had just been the guys singing the chorus, I would like the song more, I'm pretty sure. I don't like I actively don't like the chorus on this version for the reasons you just mentioned. I don't like that
yeah,
vocal approach. If I would have been producing the record, I think I would have said, guys, let's try something else. We'll put that in the can. We'll try something else to see. I'm not really sold on that, but
yeah.
it's what it is. Like you said, it's an iconic song. You know, but for me, it's definitely not one of my favorites on the album, and mainly for that reason.
So, you know, we've got these first three Kiss records, you know, we've just kind of delved through. You know, and even just in discussing them, I can't necessarily detect what order you're going to rank them in. I can't, there's no dead giveaway where it's like, oh, okay, you're going to put this one ahead of that one, or whatever. And for me, I had to crunch the numbers myself to find out. But the funny thing about it is that once I crunched the numbers, two of these albums were really close. Um, One I thought was going to come out on top, didn't, and the one that came out on top came out a full 3% higher than the next than what came in the second slot. So I'm ready for the 3, 2, 1 countdown if you are.
I will, but I want to just preface that with saying that there's
Sure.
there are four percentage points separated these three records for me, and
Four? Did you say four? Same here. Same here.
1% separated one from number two. So that being said, I'm ready for the count.
Let me see if I got you correct. You said that there's but between the number one and the number three, there was a 4% difference, correct?
Correct.
Same here. And you said there's a 1% difference between your number one and number two spot.
Correct.
For me, the 1% difference was between the number two and number three.
That's weird.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to it.
So in the number three spot for me and you, it is the debut. Ooh.
Debut.
Wow. Interesting.
I was a bit surprised. It's the debut.
Right?
It came in at 78%. So it's 3.9 stars, which I round down to 3.5. So it's a 3.5 star record.
Wait a minute. You said it's a 3.9?
Right, because
you round it down?
Yes, because in order for it to go up to 4, it would have to be 3.95, because 5 and up bumps the 9 up, bumps it to 4. That's how it works for me. That's how I do it. Yep.
Interesting. See, I would say 3.95 is a 4.
But it's not. It's 3.90. So it's a 3.3.5.
See, the only way I would, me personally, and it's fine as long as you're consistent with your own system, that's fine. Or you know, within your way. To me, the way I do it is, if it's 3.7, then it'll be 3.5. If it's 3.75 or above, then it's, you know, because
well, that's where I gave it 78%. So that's where that comes in.
Yeah, okay. In the number two spot. Ready?
Mm-hmm. So for me, this was 81%, 4 stars, 4.05 average. So it was a solid 4-star album.
See, for me, these were 74 and 75% respectively. And then, of course, the number one, then that leaves me with the number one was Hotter Than Hell, and yours was Dressed to Kill. And
this 82%, 4.1. So it's again 4 stars, but 82%, just beat out Hotter Than Hell by 1 percentage point.
For me, it's a 78% and with a 4-star average. So, you know, it's funny because I thought Dressed to Kill was going to be my number one. I mean, I'm still wearing the shirt, right? I thought it's like going into this, like, Dressed to Kill. I've always loved that record. It's my number one. But when I went down song by song, it actually came out to be Hotter Than Hell. So
yeah, and I thought the debut might be better because even though it's not the best sounding record, it has all those classic songs, but I don't like those songs as much, a number of them studio wise. And again, if you would take Kissin' Time off, it would have been, that was the difference between it. It would have been a 4-star album, and I might have had to go to a tiebreaker with that.
Well, given the fact that the only copies of that that exist without Kissin' Time are the very first run that were pressed, you know, and the test pressings that would have existed before that. I mean, if any, if any of them still are around, they're few and far between. And so Kiss in Time has been part of that record since the second pressing of it in
Oh yeah.
1974. So, there are other albums where you can make an argument, should this be included or should it not? But in this situation, yeah, that has to be included. Yeah. So
Yeah, and the only reason I mention it is because that's an example where if that song were not on the record, the album in my rated it would have knocked it up,
yeah, just because we're dealing with averages, but at the same time, like you said earlier, would you prefer to have the album without it? And it's like, well, no,
No,
of course not.
no.
Yeah, because you want everything that they've done. So at any rate, that concludes our look at the first three Kiss records. Obviously, the next set is Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun. We'll be doing those reasonably soon. And if you agree with some of the comments that we've made here, or have some real fundamental disagreements, feel free to comment. We'll be attempting to respond and to be active with people if they're interested in engaging in the conversation. Please subscribe, that'd be super cool. And please check out our newest single that we recently released with guest vocalist Blaze Bayley, formerly of Iron Maiden. That'd be really, really cool if you did that. So
Yeah.
thanks for stopping by. Thanks for sticking with us. Any last thoughts, Brent?
No, this was a good discussion, and I'm looking forward to part two. It ought to be fun.
Yep. Okay. Until next time. Bye-bye.